What if the very thing that makes you exceptional is also the thing that makes your life harder than almost anyone around you realizes? Most people assume that being highly intelligent is like winning the genetic lottery. They think everything comes easy, that your brain is this superpower with no downsides. But neuroscience tells a very different story. Research into how the brain actually works reveals that higher cognitive ability often comes paired with unique neurological burdens that can make everyday life surprisingly difficult. Let's start with something that probably happened to you recently. You're at a gathering, maybe a party, maybe just lunch with coworkers, and someone starts talking about the weather, or last night's reality TV episode, and your brain just checks out. Not because you're arrogant, not because you think you're better than anyone, but because your mind is starving for something it isn't getting. Think about that feeling for a second. The guilt that comes with it, the voice in your head that says, just be normal, just participate. And then the exhaustion that follows when you force yourself to do it anyway. This isn't a character flaw, it's how your brain is wired. Here's what's actually happening inside your skull. Your prefrontal cortex, the region responsible for complex reasoning and abstract thought, tends to be more active and more dominant in highly intelligent brains. This means your neural reward pathways require a higher level of cognitive stimulation just to feel engaged. Surface-level chatter about mundane topics simply doesn't activate the circuits your brain craves. So while everyone else is happily exchanging pleasantries, your mind is reaching for something deeper: ideas, systems, the fundamental nature of reality. And that disconnect between what your brain needs and what social convention provides can make even a friendly gathering feel genuinely draining. But here's where it gets really interesting. This pattern doesn't stop at parties. It follows you into every conversation you have. Have people ever described you as quiet, reserved, or hard to read? There's something happening inside your skull that most people don't see. When you formulate a response, your brain runs it through multiple evaluation circuits before it ever reaches your mouth. The anterior cingulate cortex, which monitors for errors and conflict, works over time in high cognitive brains. You're essentially stress testing your own thoughts, counterarguments, potential misinterpretations, logical consistency, all within seconds. The pause people interpret as distance or seriousness is actually your brain being incredibly thorough. They think you're disengaged. You're actually engaged at a level they can't see. But here's where most people get stuck. That analytical depth that makes you thorough can come at a real cost in social situations. Research shows an inverse relationship between cognitive intelligence and emotional intelligence in some individuals. When your brain allocates enormous resources to analytical processing, the circuits responsible for reading body language and picking up on emotional cues may not be as finely tuned. This doesn't mean you lack empathy. It means your brain processes social information differently, more deliberately, more slowly, than the automatic way most people navigate exchanges. The result is that social situations can feel like navigating a minefield. While others seem to glide through conversations on instinct, you're computing every variable in real time: the tone, the timing, the subtext. And by the time you've processed it all, the moment has already passed. This principle shows up everywhere once you start looking for it, especially in friendship. To feel truly bonded with someone, your brain needs to experience what neuroscientists call neural synchrony, where your brain waves actually begin to mirror the other person's during conversation. This happens most naturally when two people operate at similar cognitive levels. When there's a significant gap, that synchrony is harder to achieve. The other person might feel intimidated or unable to keep up. You might feel like you're constantly simplifying yourself. Neither side feels authentic, and the connection never fully forms. This is why intelligent people often have very few close friends but are fiercely loyal to those they do connect with. The loneliness that comes from this is real, and it's genuinely painful. And this is where your brain makes a move that feels like survival but actually deepens the isolation. When social life feels unrewarding, your dopamine system naturally redirects toward domains where it does receive positive feedback. For you, that's intellectual work. Your brain literally rewards you more for solving a complex problem than for attending a social event. Over time, this creates a feedback loop. More time alone, buried in projects and research, less time building relationships. And here's the cruel part. Neuroscience shows that social isolation activates the same brain regions associated with physical pain. So even though your conscious mind might prefer the solitude, your brain is quietly suffering from the lack of connection. Now, I want to pause here because this is where most people check out. They hear the social struggles and think, okay, I get it, smart people are awkward and lonely. But the mechanism goes way deeper than that. Because what happens next has nothing to do with other people. It's what your brain does when it's alone with itself. And this is where things get genuinely difficult. Here's where it gets really interesting. When you face a decision, even something seemingly simple, your brain doesn't just pick an option and move on. Your dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, responsible for executive function and planning, goes into overdrive. It generates multiple possible outcomes and evaluates each one across numerous dimensions. Risk, reward, consequences, second-order effects, ethical implications. A less active prefrontal cortex might see 2 doors and walk through one. Your brain sees 2 doors, then imagines 20 rooms behind each door, then maps out the long-term consequences of each room, then identifies the potential pitfalls in each scenario. And suddenly, a simple choice becomes paralyzing. This is analysis paralysis, and it's not indecisiveness. It's depth of processing that outruns the need for action. But here's where most people get stuck. That same hunger for stimulation that makes small talk unbearable doesn't just affect your social life. Highly intelligent brains tend to have higher baseline levels of neural activity. This means your brain requires more stimulation just to feel engaged. Routine tasks, repetitive work, anything that doesn't challenge you, it fails to activate your reward centers. Your brain has a higher threshold for satisfaction than most people's. This can look like restlessness, distractibility, even what appears to be an attention disorder. But it's not a deficit. It's a surplus of cognitive capacity that isn't being utilized. When that surplus goes unmet for too long, it doesn't just feel like boredom. It can spiral into frustration, emptiness, and even depression. Not because something is wrong with you, but because your brain is chronically understimulated. And then there's something that almost nobody talks about. Intelligence and emotional sensitivity often coexist in the same brain. Your mirror neuron system, which allows you to empathize by internally simulating other people's emotional states, can be highly active. This means you don't just understand that someone is hurting. You feel their pain in your own nervous system. Neuroscientists call this emotional contagion, and for highly sensitive, highly intelligent people, it can be overwhelming. Your pattern recognition abilities, the same ones that let you see connections others miss, also make you notice subtle signs of distress that most people overlook. A micro-expression, a shift in tone, a pause that doesn't belong. You pick up on all of it, and your nervous system responds to all of it. By the end of a day spent around other people, you're not just tired, you're carrying emotional weight that isn't even yours. This principle shows up everywhere once you start looking for it. Because underneath all of these struggles is one that ties them together. When you were identified as intelligent early in life, by test scores, by teachers, by parents who meant well, your brain built part of its identity around that label. Intelligence became woven into your self-concept. And when your self-concept is tied to achievement, every task becomes a test of who you are. This creates a perfectionism cycle that neuroscientists have linked to heightened activity in the amygdala, your brain's fear center. But the fear isn't just of failing the task. It's of losing your core sense of self. Who are you if you're not the smart one? This is the root of imposter syndrome for high cognitive people, and it's exhausting. The chronic stress from this pressure produces cortisol, and over time, elevated cortisol can actually damage the hippocampus, the very region responsible for memory and learning. Your fear of not being smart enough literally impairs the brain function that makes you smart. Let that land for a second. The pressure you put on yourself to perform, it's not just unpleasant, it's biologically self-defeating. So here's a small experiment I want you to try this week. It has 2 parts. Part 1. Pick one social situation, a coffee with a friend, a work meeting, even a family dinner, and go in with a single question ready. Not a surface question about the weather or what someone does for a living. Something like, what's something you've changed your mind about recently? Or, what's a problem you're currently stuck on? That kind of question bypasses small talk and activates the kind of exchange your brain actually craves. Ideas, perspective shifts, genuine problem solving. This one is harder. The next time you catch yourself paralyzed by a decision, spinning through every possible outcome, write down exactly 2 options. Not all of them, just 2. Then give yourself 5 minutes to choose. The goal isn't to make the perfect choice. The goal is to prove to your brain that you can make a choice and survive the outcome. Neither of these is about becoming someone you're not. It's about giving your brain the stimulation and relief it needs without draining yourself in the process. Try both once, see what happens. Here's what I want you to take away from all of this. These 9 struggles, the boredom with small talk, the overthinking before you speak, the social exhaustion, the difficulty finding genuine connection, the retreat into isolation, the analysis paralysis, the chronic understimulation, the emotional absorption, the self-imposed pressure. They are not character flaws. They are not things that are broken in you. They are features of how your brain is built. The same neural wiring that lets you see patterns others miss, think abstractly, synthesize complex information across domains, that wiring also creates these challenges. Understanding the neuroscience is the first step toward working with your brain instead of against it. If this landed for you, subscribe and share with someone who needs to hear it, and drop a comment below. Tell me which of these patterns you've experienced most. I read everyone.